If you've played pretty much any video game from the last couple years, you've probably heard the term games as a service, which is a description of the kind of title that people are trying to release nowadays. Selling a game for $60 once only nets you about $60. Selling a game that can have consistent and repeatable microtransactions or other small purchases, or even just a subscription to play the game at all, can net you an unlimited amount of money given the proper amount of time. Because of this, games as a service has become really popular with a ton of different game developers and game publishers. And that really has led to some frustration amongst the gaming community. Not only because games are monetized far more heavily than they are now, but because most of them require an always online internet connection to be able to play. Make sure that you're connected to the servers for your online, always available experience. But how did we get here? What was the first game as a service? And how did it become what it is today? And how did it become acceptable? Let's take a peek back through gaming history and cover a couple things that you might not know about this term, and uncover a couple things that you might not want to know either. This is my very first Legundo doc. This is What Are Games as a Service? Before we can really talk about this, we need to come up with a standardized definition. Wikipedia, for as random and unstandardized as it is pretty much an easy place to go since this is the first result on Google. They define games as a service as an extension of software as a service, which itself is defined as a software licensing and delivery model in which software is licensed on a subscription basis and centrally hosted. It's sometimes referred to as on-demand software. Usually, you have a thin client that is really just a UI that connects with some sort of central server or central database, and a majority of the processing and actual brain power of the application lives there, meaning that you need to constantly check for your permission to be able to use the software that you're paying for. Microsoft moved their Office suite as a software as a service model in early 2010s. Games as a service, however, started to come into the vernacular in 2004, when MMOs started to become a thing. A lot of people, when you say MMO, think World of Warcraft, but it wasn't the first MMO, not by a long shot. The first MMO happened way back in 1996, and it was called Meridian 59, and their website is gloriously 1996 even to this day. The game actually launched on Steam in August of this year and is now playable for free. Interestingly enough, they still list the launch date of the game as September 27th, 1996, which is a full 7 years before Steam came into existence in September of 2003. I think this officially makes it the oldest game on Steam. Considering it was launched before Steam was ever a thing, before YouTube was ever a thing, that's pretty impressive that it's still kicking. There are other MMOs, far too many to mention. Runescape and World of Warcraft are two that are still quite active to this day, and both of which have a monthly subscription available. Now, it's not required nowadays since free-to-play games have become more normalized and much more expected from the average consumer. But to be able to hit the high-level, endgame, high-tier content, you're going to have to pay, and pay a pretty penny. World of Warcraft subscriptions currently run $14.99 monthly, meaning that $60 title, that $60 launch price that we mentioned at the beginning of the video, kind of accepted cost of video games nowadays, that's only 4 months. You're going to be buying that 3 times over to be able to play for a full year. But MMOs like this, subscription-based games, were the outlier in the early 2000s, and very much something considered by most to be for the most hardcore of hardcore. Instead, most titles, even if they were online via Xbox Live, PlayStation Plus, or available through Steam and online play, relied on DLC packs in order to make additional revenue after the launch of the game. These usually included a new story or a new section to the campaign, or possibly an alternate take on the original story that launched with the title, or for multiplayer games, could include new game modes, new maps, new arenas to play in, and possibly new weapons or new player customization options that became available with the expanded title. These normally ran for about $10 or more, sometimes ranging at about the $15-20 mark on average, and each was considered a substantive update to the game that it was originally launched on. These DLC packs, however, turned out to be quite a big ask from some consumers. Some people saying, "I've paid $60 for the game as a whole already, why do you want me paying $15 more for only a few more maps or only another 2 hours of story?" They were sometimes thought of as cut content or unfinished things that were just pulled from the original launch of the game. And while this might not have been true in 2003, it definitely seems far more true in 2017 and 2018. But DLC packs as a whole seemed like an extra bonus thing that you could buy if and only if you wanted this additional experience on top of the complete experience you purchased on the original disc. Then came Oblivion. This was the first game to include something that people considered a microtransaction, a coin termed by Microsoft actually. In the Xbox Live Arcade, they had an idea of, instead of selling expensive DLC packs that were $10, $15 or more, they would sell smaller customizable content that would be repeatably purchasable, or just smaller transactions in general that might be more palatable to the average user. They also had the idea of obscuring money and instead having Microsoft points, where 80 points equaled roughly $1. This way, you'd only be spending 80 points on something instead of 99 cents, and it seemed a lot more abstract and a lot less real to a lot of their users. The first real microtransaction came with Oblivion's Horse Armor DLC. At the time, it became a joke amongst the entire industry, calling this DLC when it was really just a cosmetic option for something in-game. No new story, no new maps, nothing substantive about it. Little did the industry know that this would be the beginning to a flood of not only a new type of transaction in games, but an entire industry based around this kind of action. Originally, microtransactions and the Xbox Live Arcade were expected to make $5 million per game additional. And that sounds like a lot until you realize that $50 to $500 million is more along the tune of what most titles make with microtransactions today. With microtransactions now being somewhat acceptable and being able to buy additional skins or voice perks or small cosmetic items, not substantive, and not something that was required by every member of your party in order to be able to play the titles you love, games started to capitalize on this a little bit more. The term of random loot boxes can actually be traced back to a few games, but the one who made it what it was definitely Overwatch. It was pretty much the only progression system that the game actually had. Every time you'd level up, you would earn a loot box, or you could pay additional money to get additional loot boxes and unlock additional items. Now these items could be duplicates that you could sell back to the store, in finger quotes, to recoup a small amount of credits that would eventually allow you to purchase other items. This is not unique to Overwatch at all, but they definitely seem to pioneer the way. Between Overwatch, Hearthstone, Counter-Strike, Halo 5, Gears of War, it even made its way into the Shadow of War single-player campaign. Loot boxes have permeated every aspect of the gaming culture. But it's not without community pushback. Thinking back to Star Wars Battlefront 2 and the hate on the loot box situation and monetization structure of the game, it actually had loot boxes pulled from the game at launch and prevented people from purchasing things with the premium credits. Instead, you had to grind in order to unlock things, but the grind was set at a quite painful 25 to 40 hours of gameplay to be able to unlock iconic heroes like Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker. This has led to multiple different pushbacks and controversies, as well as new regulations which have been introduced across multiple governments on what can and cannot be monetized inside of video games. But this was an example of where the tide was going when it came to the gaming industry. It wasn't just about selling a game for $60 and hoping to push enough units to be able to recoup your costs and make a profit. Instead, you could even sell the game as a loss leader, understanding that you could make your money back over microtransactions by even a small portion of the community, funding the entire population of your game's expenses and more. Overwatch went on to make Blizzard $1 billion, that's with a B, in its first year on the market and has been their most profitable game launch to date. But Overwatch is still a $40 game, which means there is a barrier to entry to be able to be part of this microtransaction-based revenue stream. Instead, a lot of companies now are pushing for the game to be free as a whole and relying solely on microtransactions to make it work. This new generation of free-to-play games is dominated by one name in particular, which really just has permeated every aspect of pop culture to a way that I haven't seen since Minecraft, and that's Fortnite. Fortnite started as an early access title where you fought against waves of zombies with a cute little robot called Ray talking into your ear. Then, after the success of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, a popular battle royale game, which itself is $30 to this day, Fortnite decided, yeah, we can do that, and we can probably do it a little bit better. They launched Fortnite Battle Royale, which was free to play. Where the base Fortnite game is still to this day $60, Battle Royale instead was free to the world, and they started monetizing it very quickly and very uniquely. Instead of going with randomized loot boxes, they instead had items that you could purchase specifically. However, items are only available in the shop for a limited amount of time, leading to this sort of artificial scarcity. You never know if you're going to miss out on a skin and when it's going to be available again. This, instead of having to rely on people randomly getting the thing that they want, gives them the thing that they want right away, but makes them feel much more invested in purchasing every skin, because they never know which one they might want at any point in time. They also have the Battle Pass, which works as a way to maintain player engagement not only through microtransactions but also playtime, keeping their population high and keeping match times short. The Battle Pass unlocks additional cosmetics as you play and fight through different challenges to earn additional bonuses. If you don't like having to grind that far though, don't worry, you can spend a little bit of money and fast track your way through that. Honestly, compared to the loot boxes, the reaction and reception towards Fortnite's monetization has been overwhelmingly positive. Many people comparing games that allow you to buy what you want to be the preferable, if lesser evil, of the two. Even the latest Call of Duty has jumped in on this as well, to a somewhat comical degree considering the store looks oddly reminiscent of Fortnite's. But then again, Call of Duty is not immune to the controversy of copying off of other people's homework. So now we have games that are completely free to get and have optional microtransactions, optional additional purchases. You can still get Fortnite and pay no money at all and play into the game and be a part of the game title without contributing to their bottom line. This doesn't always work for game companies, so the next logical step would be to not have people thinking about the game and just paying for the privilege to play. But with the $60 upfront price tag not seeming as palatable compared to other free-to-play games, the only thing you could do is move to a subscription, and nobody would really try that, right? Well, enter EA. The latest Battlefield game, Battlefield 5, is now currently available to play on all platforms by everybody. That wasn't the truth a couple weeks ago. In fact, the earliest and easiest way to be able to play Battlefield 5 was to not buy the game at all, but instead opt in to Origin Premier Access, which is a monthly recurring subscription of $5 or more. This subscription gained you early access into the Battlefield 5 environment, but they were very quick to not call it early access. Instead, they said it was priority access and everyone else was just there for the full launch. You were just playing before it was launched. It was pre-launch gameplay. It was early access in all but name, and you were able to play first. And a lot of people didn't look at this as paying a subscription to play first. They looked at it as paying customers of a $60 price tag were being punished for not buying the game the way the EA expected them to. But really, this is the way I expect to see games going right now. About a year ago, the then president of EA made a comment that a uncapped subscription, one that could repeat month after month, is their expected endgame for game releases anymore. Getting people to buy into a game monthly for an uncapped amount of time and an uncapped subscription is far more preferable to a $60 purchase once, which could then end up as a resold game secondhand which they see no money off of. Now, Battlefield 5 is not going to be including random loot boxes after the pushback on EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2, but they have said that there's going to be a premium currency available, and I would expect something akin to Fortnite's store again, being able to purchase exactly what you want, albeit the times on each item being very limited to drive up scarcity and drive up the necessity to compulsively purchase every skin available. So, games as a service are always online, always available games that focus on engagement and drive players to spend money through microtransactions for an uncapped amount of money instead of just focusing on a one-time purchase up front. They have dominated the game cycle, and everything is sort of moving here. You still have some single-player experiences, which provide something really unique, but there's this hybrid going around anymore. Red Dead Redemption 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Hitman 2, all of these have a single player story which you get on purchase, but instead include episodic content which is released over time to maintain player engagement and make sure people are playing over and over. While not all of these include the small microtransaction based cosmetics, they include instead a season pass which allows people to buy in for all of the content up front, even though it's drip fed out over time. Games as a service are not going to be going away, at least not for a while, until whatever the next most profitable thing has been discovered by whatever executives happen to come up with a crazy enough idea for it to pass. But it's interesting to look back at how we got here and how much the culture around things like microtransactions and DLC has changed, and how much more accepting people have become of an always online title. There was a ton to talk about here, and this is still only scratching the surface of a greater conversation about how games have changed over the last 2 decades. While games become more and more popular, we're going to be seeing more and more things like this. Accessibility is key. Getting as many people playing your game is the primary goal, and then aggressively monetizing them after having the lowest possible barrier to entry to be able to get into your ecosystem, that's step 2. I have no idea what step 3 is, but it probably involves some sort of laser firing moon base that they can lord over planets with the threat of total destruction. For now, it's just good to know where we are and how we got here. So this is just a partial story of the history of games as a service. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you next time.